Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am pleased to have Chloe Barnes with me here today in the Yours Truly virtual studio. My trip to ARC was one of adventure, intrigue, and mystery. What would it be like? Who would I meet and who would I see? What does this all mean? Along the journey, a friend of the corner pointed Chloe in my direction, who subsequently reached out to me through the ARC messaging app. Chloe and I agreed to connect at ARC, but never made the when and where plan. However, on the last day, headed into the lunch area, I heard a young lady talking about why she was at ARC, and the story sounded familiar. I looked over, and it was Chloe from the app. We had a brief exchange, and I asked her if she might be interested in having a conversation here on Yours Truly. You see, one of the stories that I've been very curious about is, what does Gen Z think about this corner of the internet? And I honestly think their perspective is a very important one, as it is necessarily the future. That is why I hosted my Gen Z Roundtable a few months ago and have had conversations with President Foxman, Afriel, and Joseph Lambrecht. And the Gen Z Roundtable episode just so happened to be what Chloe was watching when I reached back out to settle up a date for this episode. But before we go on, don't forget to like and subscribe for the vanity metrics. And if you believe the work of Yours Truly in Conversation Craft, consider becoming a channel member. Members get early podcast previews and personal updates from me about the future of the channel. Link in the description. Chloe recently quit being a student at a traditional college and applied for Jordan Peterson's Peterson Academy. This was something that really grabbed my attention. Chloe sounds like a believer, and her story is one I think raises and answers a lot of questions. Today, I hope to hear that story, hear about her experiences with Peterson Academy and ARC, and what her hopes are for the future. So sit back, clock in, and do some chores in our newfound time together as we practice some conversation craft here today on the Yours Truly podcast. So without further delay, I give you Chloe Barnes, student of Peterson Academy. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud. Did I get most of that right?
Yes, you did. Good morning, everybody.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks, Chloe, for being here. So, kind of a tradition in some of this conversation space that I'm involved in on the internet. There's a guy named Paul Vanderklay who's talked a lot about this guy over the years, and you obviously have connected to Peterson Academy, and so there's like this kind of tangential ecosystem, and that's a big part of even how ARC, what it is. It's just like, everybody that's kind of in this space comes. So anyways, in that tradition, one of the questions to kind of get conversation going is this kind of magical question, which is simply, Chloe, tell me about the home you grew up in.
Yes. So I grew up in Dallas, Texas, was born there, have lived there my entire life. And I am a true Texan in every sense of the word. I grew up riding horses, waking up at 5 a.m. to get barn chores done in exchange for lessons. That was kind of my world. I was homeschooled, and so that kind of allowed for a lot of creative expression and opportunity to pick and choose our own unique extracurricular activities, and horses were a big part of my life growing up. So very classically Texan. I don't have an accent, which does disappoint some people, but here we are. Like I said, I was homeschooled and got that opportunity my entire academic career. I actually graduated early at 16 because I was very ready to delve into the world of higher education.
So that's kind of, so Texas, horses. So, I have, my daughter took horse riding lessons a few years ago from some friends of ours who've been big into horse riding. Actually, they're down in Florida. They like this friend of ours. She's been down in Florida doing horses for like training for like, I guess, pre-junior Olympics or something like that.
Oh, wow.
But they built a stable and had multiple barns and did the whole thing. So did y'all have like land, or did you go somewhere for that? Or
No, we didn't. I grew up in the suburbs, so unfortunately no land, but we live in vicinity to land. If you drive about 45 minutes out, you'll kind of get to where you see the farms and the horse ranches and things like that. And so we were just connected through friends of friends and did some Western and some English, kind of dabbled in both. I'm partial to English just because I think it's fun and I like wearing all the fancy boots and accessories, but Western's cool too if dirt is your thing.
Well, there's a lot of that in Texas, I think.
Yes, lots of dirt, very flat.
So you homeschooled, which afforded you a lot of, you said, kind of freedom. You graduated early. Mm-hmm. What were other big parts of your life growing up that were important?
So, of course, my family, I'm the oldest of 4 girls, and so I'm fairly close to all my sisters, and we definitely kept each other busy and entertained. We also participated as a family unit in community theater. My dad grew up doing theater. My mom is a dancer, and so they would direct and choreograph musicals that my sisters and I would participate in, which was so much fun. We're affiliated with this wonderful community theater about 10 minutes from our house, and they had a lot of homeschoolers there as well, extended us the opportunity to even write our own plays, get involved in the directing process. So that was certainly something that kind of shaped my middle school and high school career. I got to write, direct, and produce an original musical with my best friend. That was my kind of capstone senior project, which was so much fun. Had a blast doing that. What else?
You got books back there.
All the classical homeschool interests.
What would that be? Like, flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah, so theater kids and homeschooling definitely go hand in hand. I don't know why that is. They're not saying there aren't some wonderful public school theater kids, but because it is so work intensive, you definitely tend to see a higher concentration, at least in my area, of homeschoolers in the community theaters, which honestly was really wonderful because it provided kind of an opportunity to meet and interact with kids from all different backgrounds. You have kids, coming out of the public school. This is their first time homeschooling, kids who have grown up homeschooled, city kids, country kids. It didn't matter. We all kind of met on the common ground that was the stage, and it was a lot of fun.
It is. Both my daughters recently in the last 2 years have done community theater productions, and I grew up doing a little bit, but in the small town that I'm from, most of the productions actually were happening in churches. That was actually where a lot of there wasn't, I guess, a small, many, many years ago, community theater going at the time, but we would have large Christmas or spring, they buy the package from Lifeway or whatever, which was like, and we would all do that. And I had a lead, and I had one where I was like, I was this little Casey Jones. I had to do this rap at First Baptist Church back in like 1994, and it was like I was really edgy back then because I was
very edgy.
I was rapping,
rapping in church, very edgy.
So yeah, it's a big thing. It sounds like I have that family that does the horses, like they were homeschooled. So when you're like talking about that, I'm like mirroring this thing in my mind, but I know homeschool's growing in the States rapidly at the same time that there's a lot of pressure, like in the public school systems and, institutions, government, everything. And I think this really plays into the conversation that we're kind of going to be dancing around today is education. But, what was it? You said it seemed like there's a lot of people in homeschool that were like connected to the fine arts as well. Like, what do you think that is as part of this, is also this interest in the classical nature of education? Can you tease that out a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, just from the crowd that I grew up with, it was because we actually had time to kind of pursue what we were interested in, like personally. So public schools are wonderful in that, they do supply a lot of opportunity for extracurricular, but with that regimented school schedule and the homework following afterward, kids don't have as much time to really think creatively and actually determine, okay, what is my interest and what do I want to do? And so that, at least in my experience, is kind of why you would see kids super invested in theater to the point where they're, writing their own music and writing their own scripts at 13, 14, 15 years old. Same kind of went with the agriculture. I had friends growing up who would show cows and they would show goats, and that was their passion. And so their form of extracurricular was, okay, let's learn how to take care of this cow and raise it, and how do we show it, and what does transportation look like? Because they had the time to really get creative and do their own research. And of course, parents play a huge role in that too, right? Facilitating those opportunities for their kids. And my mom did a really great job of that and allowing us to kind of explore our own unique interests, my sisters and I.
Yeah. So I'm going to pause it real quick. All right. We'll do some editing here on this little spot. But okay. So you're just talking about kind of if agriculture, showing cows, and that's your passion, you can really, really focus and specialize. Mm-hmm. Same thing with theater and whatnot. So it seems like you had a lot of self-directed opportunities for like autonomous self-directed learning in that way. But to write something like a play and a screenplay, and direct and all that stuff, you have to have like a substance of creative stew to pull from. Mm-hmm. So what really fueled that creative stew for you? What were you drawing from when you wrote and directed a play?
Yes. So the creative stew was definitely a collective effort. It wasn't just me. I had two very good friends, one of whom is a great writer. The other, he writes music professionally, ended up going to school in New York, is big into theater, still is. And so the concept behind the idea was he had written a soundtrack. And so he had the song lyrics put together, and he had a conceptual idea of kind of where he wanted to take the music, and came to my friend Elizabeth and I and said, look, here's this idea that I have. Can we take it and run with it? And at the time, I think we were 15, 16 years old. So we took the lyrics that he had written out and we said, okay, how can we conceptualize this and put it into a play? And she and I are both big readers, had always been big readers. And so I feel like that makes a huge difference whenever you're endeavoring to write for the very first time. If you have good literature to pull from and you've seen how stories are constructed and the right language to use. And so you kind of pull on what you've observed through books to put together a script and a screenplay. And you send it through your sister and you say, hey, you're really good at editing. Will you take a look at this and fix all the things that are don't make sense, or the plot holes that are there? And so it really was a group project. There was probably 5 or 6 of us total that worked on the writing and the editing. And it was so much fun. And it was no pressure because we were young, and our parents were very encouraging, and they were behind us completely. And even though, the concept of 15, 16-year-old kids writing a musical and putting it on a stage is kind of crazy. And so having parents come behind us and say, we absolutely support you and we're going to do whatever it takes to make it happen, obviously makes a massive difference. And so we were very fortunate in that.
How did that feel, executing that?
Oh, it was so much fun. Like, wonderful. The show was called Broken Symphony. It was a full-length musical, about 2 hours.
Wow.
And we performed it at the community theater down the street from our house. And it actually got picked up by another community theater about 20 minutes away. They loved the idea and they said, we want to come put this on in our show. Will you guys bring your cast over to Richardson, about 25 minutes? And the second time that we did it, we actually got to incorporate adults in the show as well. There were adults and kids in the plot. The original production was all kids. The second production was kids and adults. And just incredible group of people that we got to work with.
Wow. So you graduated high school at 16. How old are you now?
I'm 23. Okay.
So what happened between 16 and 23?
A lot happened between 16 and 23. COVID, for one. But I graduated, my first day of community college was the day after my 16th birthday. I didn't even drive myself to class. My mom took me. And it was a theater class, of course. That was my very first extracurricular for college. And my motivation behind graduating early was that I was so ready to enter into the workforce. I was ready to start contributing, and I felt like I had kind of gotten all I could get out of being homeschooled, and had worked ahead a lot, had worked through summers, and so decided I think I'm ready for community college and I want to give this a go. And so I was able to spend 2 semesters at a community college, and it was wonderful. I had incredible professors, and this may just be my experience, but I feel like professors at community college just have so much passion for the students and for the subjects that they teach, because maybe they're not getting paid as much as professors in state universities. And so they're truly there for love of teaching. At least that was my experience. And so the professors that I was able to learn from were truly just kind and wonderful and very, very passionate people. And then the pandemic hit, and my transition from community college into private school, I actually attended Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, was kind of born out of necessity, because suddenly most classes were, online. In person wasn't an option anymore. I had kind of maxed out my potential at community college, and for that 4-year degree, I needed to switch over to a university officially. And so made that transition in the spring of 2020.
Okay, so what was spring of 2020 like? That's obviously, I'm going to university on the internet.
Going to university on the internet. I did finish my degree and I did graduate, but I will say I will never attend a formal online university again. I was not a fan. And COVID certainly, didn't help, because not only are you completely online, but you also can't go anywhere. So there was no, studying in coffee shops or going out with other groups of online students. You were truly, truly isolated to the full extent of the word. And that you didn't even really get an opportunity, at least I didn't, to interact with your professors. A lot of what they were putting out was pre-recorded lectures that they would upload for the students to watch, and then you would write a summary of what you had listened to, and there were tests, and that was it. Like, the extent of communication that you would get with your professors was through email. And so to go from learning in person in small group settings at community college, and even, being homeschooled and around different co-ops, to completely online and digital and no face-to-face interaction was very difficult for me.
What did that, what did that make you think about society? What did that make you think about the world in that experience?
For me, the narrative is you need the degree to get a job, which in a large majority of situations is true. A lot of corporations, they do need that piece of paper to prove that you did it and that you sat through those 4 years of education. And so I was in it for the paper, essentially, and I knew that this was something that I had to finish. But for me, experiencing it online and just the lack of effort on behalf of my fellow students, and because I was homeschooled, I'm a little bit of a self-starter, and so I was kind of used to taking the reins on my own education and basically DIYing it. But to have to continue doing that through higher education and in a college setting was really discouraging. I had expected to be able to kind of step into a space where I would receive the opportunity to be mentored, to ask questions, to learn from people who were smarter than me, to have conversations with students who had differing opinions, and to step into a space that was the complete opposite, where it was just me continuing to do more of what I had already done in terms of DIYing my education, like self-starter. I was like, what am I here for? What is the purpose behind this? And I also had a little bit of discouragement behind the fact that anybody, if they really wanted to, could just go in and look up the answers to the quizzes. They could go in and chat GPT all their papers. They could graduate with a 4.0 and do zero work. There was nobody really checking to see if they were putting any effort in. And so it cheapens the degree, right? So you work really hard to get these grades, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't mean anything, because you could have the same grades as a person who didn't do anything at all. And so really my whole mindset probably wasn't in the best place. I was very discouraged, and I was just done at that point.
I mean, how many people, when they're thinking right now, like I've got a 15-year-old, right? I'm thinking about college, or I've got friends whose kids are going into college because I'm about 40.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, we have this idea of what we think college is.
Mm-hmm.
You're telling me it's something different now, which I actually went back to school in 2017. So I did community college to become a registered nurse back in 17, 18, 19. And so I kind of got a little bit of both sides of what you're saying, the community college, like passion and stuff that you were referencing earlier, but also that the tech and the Quizlets and everything else that's like coming into play on just like, what is this now whenever, and then also certain lectures just being dialed in, like prepackaged PowerPoints that are given to them. It's like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing it sounds like there was like a disenchantment with that whole reality. Like, what I think is hard is to get people maybe my age to really understand that, to conceptually understand that is happening. Like, even though now ChatGPT is now like everywhere in everything, but it's like, I don't know, how would you describe, I mean, like if you're sitting down and you're wanting to just really tell somebody, this is what I think about education, that's happening, right? What would you, how would you present that to somebody that just thinks, yeah, go get your college degree and your college experience? And like, I think those two things are actually they're almost separate now.
Yes.
on what they are, because you were actually hinting on like, I wanted this ideal, go to the coffee shop, pull out my laptop, drink my mocha and whatever, and then I'm going to class, like that didn't happen. Like you were kind of robbed of that in a way. Like, I mean, am I hitting, are these things correct?
Yes. And
how would you explain that more to people?
So basically what you're asking is what happened to the college ideal, right? Like where did that shift take place, where college stopped being the way that it was when my parents went to university, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that generation, 40s, 50s, 60s, at least to me, talked about college being the best 4 years of your life. You're going to go and you're going to make new friends, and you're going to meet your spouse, and you're going to be so thankful that you invested this time and this money, because that 4-year time period is going to completely change the trajectory of your life. And when I kind of hit that phase, and that didn't happen for me, I was left with okay, well, what now? Like college was supposed to give some sense of direction. And here I am, and I've got the piece of paper, but where do I go from here? And of course, there is a time and a place for college education. If you're going to go into the medical field, if you're going to go into research or mathematics, or I'm not trying to at all downplay the importance of that, because it is. But to attend college and expect it to be kind of the launching place for what will be the rest of your life, and to have guaranteed success post-graduation, it's just not super realistic anymore. And we're also seeing a major shift just culturally and socially, right? So the breed of kid that are in college, post-pandemic and post-social media and post all these different technological advances, the social aspect isn't even the same. And the only reason I can speak into that is because I have a younger sister who's in college right now, and she decided to go the university route and to attend. And she said, people just don't talk to each other anymore. Like they're on their phone, they're going to and from class, and that social interaction just isn't the same. And so if the education is going downhill, and if the social scene is going downhill, it really begs the question, okay, what's the point? Why are we here, and why are we doing this? And I think that's the question that my generation really is going to have to grapple with. Like, what do they want to do with their life? How are they going to get there? And what means of education do they need? Like, are we talking practical experience? Are we talking, books, going to the library, doing your own research? Are we talking attending a big university? Maybe you want to be a nurse or a doctor, and so that's the way to go. But really taking time to actually stop and think about it, and not get caught up in the silo of, okay, I just am going to this university because that's where my parents went. That you can't do that anymore. You have to be very strategic and intentional about kind of the path that you want to take post high school, I think.
So were you done with college around 20?
Yes.
And you're 24 now. So what's been going on the last couple of years for you?
23. Don't make me too old now. the past couple years actually has been working and kind of continuing with education. I finished college, like you said, at 20 and had built a relationship with a nonprofit here in Dallas called Johnny and Friends. And they are internationally based. We've got offices all over the world, but one of our biggest is in Dallas. And I had been affiliated with them by volunteering in high school and had done a couple of internships. And so they had an open position. And when I graduated and I had that piece of paper, they brought me on staff. And so I've been with them for the past several years, participating in ministry, which has been really wonderful. And then because that job is fairly flexible, which is great, it has kind of allowed me the space to continue supplementing the education. So I do a lot of like online courses and certifications, and recently Peterson Academy as well.
Yeah. So you're working with like a nonprofit ministry, and then, but are you still with them?
I am not still with them.
Okay.
I actually, we parted ways about 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
By choice for me,
Mhm.
I decided that I kind of wanted to really focus on trying to get more involved in what's happening with my generation and the culture change movement. We kind of have this nice 4-year window, I think, where we can get a lot done. And so I am going full throttle trying to figure out what I can do to help and how I can get more involved.
So is that what led you to ARC?
Yes.
So, I mean, so you're saying, you're talking about the Trump administration, you're talking about so that's on top of your experience with education, your experience with like the ideal being completely busted through what happened with COVID. And just, I mean, it's no secret that there were massive institutional failures, and you just like, it seems like they just cascaded for you, so now you're activated. And so, I mean, it's like, well, I want to talk about like ARC, your experience there, but this story about that experience, I don't think it's easy for me at, 40, blah, blah, blah. I've already got a wife and kids and a house and all this thing. It's like, whatever to be like, yeah, that was hard. That was rough. But I mean, if it's set you on a course to really want to like enact change in our culture, then it must have had a pretty massive impact on you. Like, I mean, is that correct?
Talking about my educational experience or the art conference?
Your educational experience.
Yes.
Like, so you said there's like this 4-year window. ARC is kind of a amalgamation of lots of different facets of politics, religion, economy, and energy, and all this kind of stuff. And it's so you're kind of pointed out. So from what I did kind of understand about you is that you've started, like you said, you've been doing some supplemental certification. You've gotten into Peterson Academy. So talk to me. How did you kind of learn about ARC? What was your relationship to that? How did you make that decision? Did someone reach out to you? Like, what was the thing?
So with ARC, I've been following them. When did they go public? Maybe about 2 years ago. Just after they had their first conference where the public wasn't invited, it was just kind of their core folks. They were putting together their team, had found them shortly after they had, kind of constructed their little advertisement and their statement, and they gave themselves a name and they kind of built out the website. So have been following them since then. Found out about it through Peterson, of course.
So talk about did he have a specific impact on you, like through his stuff?
Yes. So I'm a psychology major, and as you know, was not super thrilled with my educational experience, and so started looking into intellectual psychologists. Whose books can I read that will kind of give me more insight into this particular field? And my dad has been following Peterson for years, and so when I had kind of expressed this is what I'm looking for, and I just don't know where to start, he said, you need to listen to this guy, Jordan Peterson. He's really cool. And I think, I was just 20 at the time. And so I started listening to his podcasts, of course, read his books, and was just absolutely fascinated by his train of thinking and the different people that he would bring in to interview and to talk to about their very specific fields of, research or advocacy. And so kind of that basically spiraled into following all the things that he was producing, as well as the different people that he would interview, because these people clearly have a high level of intelligence. They're super aware of what's going on in the world. And so how can I learn from them? And then once he started talking about formulating Peterson Academy, he got involved with the ARC. I was like, okay, these two things are something that I absolutely want to be a part of. I don't care what it takes. I'm going to make it happen. And so when that email came through saying, hey, you're subscribed to our ARC newsletter and we would love for you to attend, I had the availability. And so just decided to take the leap and see what would come of it.
So Peterson had a big impact on you. So you're a psychology major, you start digging into kind of some of his like influences, and your dad points you to him. There's all these layers. There's like, you've hit on like the psychological layer, there's a religious layer, there's a political layer. It's very interesting.
Bouncing all over. Sorry.
No. I mean, that's the really fascinating part about this is it's kind of not just one thing, there's like a lot of pieces related. And in this corner of the internet that I play in, a big focus is that has been memed is like the meaning crisis. Mm-hmm. And, guys like John Vervaeke, I don't know if you've stumbled upon his stuff on the internet. He does a lot of work with like consciousness. He was a colleague of Peterson's at University of Toronto, and he's been on Peterson's podcast a couple of times. But yeah, this, where am I grounding myself in meaning? Because the traditional pathway for that seems to have been broken through the institutions. Yes. And so now Peterson it sounds like, is possibly offering a viable path towards that. And that you've kind of like said, I'm going to see if this can be part of like what makes sense for meaning in my life. And things like ARC, it's not the whole college experience, in 3 days, but like, oh, you're mashed up together with a bunch of people, and you can kind of meet people that you may be aligned with in different ways. Obviously, even like how this occurs. So you get to ARC, what was your kind of overall, sense and experience with ARC?
I was not expecting it to be that big, and it was so neat to sit in the auditorium and just see how many people had taken, the time to fly, some of them, literally halfway across the world to be a part of this, true think tank. How are we going to make our world a better place? And I think a lot of the narrative that's put out tends to be more pessimistic and discouraging, especially if you're in the, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, social media realm. There's a lot of doomsdayers. And so I think sometimes the temptation can be, nobody thinks the way that I think, and the world is it's going down the toilet and there's nothing we can do to stop it. And then you look around and you see, oh, wait a minute, there are people all over the world who are truly fighting for our future, who truly believe that our cultures are worth saving, whether they're from, Australia or Europe or the Middle East or South America. Seeing all those people each representing their own cultures and saying, we want to fight for our people and we want to fight for a unified tomorrow was really, really encouraging for me as a young person. And also to see that older generations stepping up too, like the willingness to actually put in the work, like for me, like they're there for my generation and for the generations to follow. And they may not even be able to, see the fruit of what they're working towards now, but they're still fighting for us. And that was very, very encouraging to be able to witness.
Did you attend most of the lectures?
I did. I attended all of them, I think, with the exception, I may have missed one on the third day because I was networking, but the rest I saw.
Well, so what was was there a highlight? Was there one that really, resonated deeply? One section or?
Being a female, I very much appreciated the different lectures surrounding the importance of bringing back the nuclear family. I think that has been a little bit on the back burner for the past several years. And so getting to hear from people coming from all different backgrounds about how we need to kind of reprioritize the idea of marriage, of having kids, of building a society that is conducive to have families and to raise children, and was very encouraging. I really enjoyed listening to that. And I also appreciated how they emphasized the importance of putting in the work in your own unique communities, right? It's kind of what Peterson talks about when he says, clean your room before you go out and try and change the world. And so I also appreciated the practicality of some of the different lectures that presented.
What yeah, it was nice actually. I saw a lot of like bassinets or
I know, so many little babies.
yeah, that was really interesting. Some of those things were pretty Gucci, to say the least. They were really fancy ones. So did you go to the family breakout dinner? Was that the one that was there one about, or maybe there was one on classical education? I can't remember. What breakout session did you end up?
Yes, I went to the one that was Living Courageously in Extreme Headwinds, which was, oh my goodness, and her name escapes me now, the Michaela School, the principal of the Michaela School in England. And the Michaela School, just for context, is a university, a primary, I think they go up through like 10th grade in England, that basically has said, we're bringing back classical education and we're not going to do a liberal agenda. And she's gone to British court and is now advocating to try and open more schools, basically just trying to protect kids, right, from the radical left and kind of what's happening there. And so she presented on education and also kind of what her vision was moving forward for, younger generations coming into school. So that's the breakout that I was at.
Was it pretty good? Did you like it, or was it?
It was very good. It was very encouraging to hear from her, and to kind of, she shared her story about what it looked like to go to court and to, battle these different lawsuits in these different families, and kind of spoke into how to be oppositional without necessarily, what's the word I'm looking for? Without being cruel or compromising morals, right? So how do you respectfully disagree with somebody in a something as large as British court? And so that was cool to hear her talking to that.
I was in a situation just yesterday on an old Discord server that's connected to this space that I hang out in here, and it was there were people that had different ideas, and it devolved into mockery. And I just thought, like, well, you're not changing my mind. Even if I agree with you, I don't know if I want to agree with you anymore, because now you're mocking somebody.
It's not productive.
No, and that was, I mean, there's scripture verses about that somewhere, but also there's my experience when I was just a little older than you, and YouTube was kind of getting its legs underneath itself. And so much of what I was paying attention to was like a debate between like evolution and biblical, all that stuff. And it was, and then it was about atheism and the existence of God, and all this stuff was so hot at the time. I was like, many times it would devolve into ad hominem. And I was like, even if you're telling me something that feels convincing, man, that doesn't really make me want to like join you. But there are people I think that like ridicule, that are attracted to that, and that's kind of scary too. But anyways, I like that side of it that you brought out, that she was saying there's a way to defend and even try to build and move forward and be strong and courageous without having to devolve into like compromising integrity and that kind of thing.
Yes, or name calling, being petty. Yeah.
So that was experience at ARC. What else? I mean, were you surprised by anything? Was there anything you wish they could have done this, or anything like that?
One thing that I was a little bit surprised by is I attended the Young Leaders Breakout, which was the first evening event that they had there, and only spent maybe about half an hour kind of walking around the room. And it was a relatively small room for the number of people that were there. And I did not see any Americans. Like, I was the only American in the room, the only one that I ran into, speaking English, which is incredible that there were so many young people from all different countries. But it was a little bit surprising to me that nobody else from my country was there. And then I drifted over into the US-Canada reception after that for the last hour or so, just to see if maybe I could run into any other, early 30s, 20s. And I couldn't find anybody there either. And not saying that they weren't. I mean, it was a huge venue. There was a lot of people. So it's very possible that our paths just never crossed. But that was kind of surprising to me. I was like, oh, where is everybody?
Yeah. So I think that's interesting because, and that's probably why we're having this conversation. Because I'm like in my late 30s for a month, and I'm
yeah, you were the youngest American that I met.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah. But I mean, again, it was a huge venue, so it's possible that they were there and I just never interacted with them. Met people from Australia and Canada
that were young,
but not from the US.
I was talking to a guy. I went to the AI breakout the second night, and this guy was from, his name was Jance, and he was from Portugal. But maybe he was from somewhere else. I don't remember. He's from Europe. He was 27, I think. And there were a lot of young people at the AI breakout, by the way. That was like, There were a lot of young people interested in that. And there was probably a girl. There was a girl from, that worked at Meta that was probably closer to 30 that was in there at my table. But he said something like he feels like the United States right now is like 3 years ahead of Europe or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But so I wonder if there's something about like young people are trying to get to what's ahead. And if America is ahead right now, in a very specific sense, like in a JD Vance going to Germany and doing something that's not been done before type of sense, then that is drawing younger people looking. Maybe the young people in America, many of y'all take for granted the freedoms that we have just continued to exist in, even though it was like the authoritarian thing like came and went, and most of the young people didn't know that was happening because like the intellectual dark web folks, that a lot of them were still keynote figures like Douglas Murray and Dave Rubin and Eric Weinstein, obviously Jordan Peterson, like they're all, Gen X. And that was like, and I was paying attention 7-8 years ago to that stuff. But that's really interesting. What do you think? Did you get a sense of what the young people were at ARC, like why they were there from other countries? Did you get a sense of that? Did you have any of those conversations?
Yes. So the different people that I interacted with, and I interacted with a lot of young people from all kinds of different countries, all different backgrounds, and kind of the general consensus is that I received was, how do we move forward from here? And I think Europe is positioned a little bit differently because, kind of like you said, they do tend to be 3 years behind the United States. So all that kind of turmoil that we saw 3 years ago coming out of, the radical leftist agenda and the different political parties, the polarization, the division, all that was happening in the United States 3 years ago, you're kind of now seeing occurring over in the United Kingdom and in the EU. And so the young people that I had interacted with were basically there for educational purposes to network. Some of them were there on business, but the consensus was, we want to know how to move forward from here to keep our countries from, basically falling apart, right? We don't want communism. We don't want socialism. We want the ability to have free speech and to kind of fight for our future as young people in our own unique countries. And so that seemed to be kind of the common theme that I heard.
Well, that's interesting because maybe Peterson being Canadian / doing a lot of his touring and everything and his big success in the United States was like we already had an arc here in a sense, like in a cultural sense, to kind of to sail through some of this stuff. And here we are post MAGA election and all this kind of stuff. It's like, okay, but the rest of the world is, and it's interesting. That's why the conference isn't in the States in the first place. Probably. I think that's part of the reason as well. But that's really fascinating to think about, that you didn't sense that there was a lot of young United States presence there. That's pretty fascinating.
Which, and that could mean nothing. That was just something that I found interesting.
Well, I don't think it means nothing. It's about attention, right? Like, and so, how did these other people get their attention, like, focused on coming to ARC, or who was putting their attention to come to ARC? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about, well, was there any other thoughts you had about ARC? Anything that you've been like kind of mulling over that we haven't kind of touched on that you thought was?
I think that my primary question coming out of the ARC conference, and I'll be interested if you have any insight into this, is practical application. So I walked away with a lot of really incredible connections and really awesome like educational experiences and lectures that I will go back and listen to again because they were great. But I've been kind of trying to think through in my head, okay, where do I go from here with all this information, and what can we do as practical next steps to kind of help advance this? I don't want to say advance agenda because that kind of makes it sound strange, but for lack of a better term, advance the agenda of the ARC conference. That's kind of been the question I've been mulling over.
Well, that last, so I went to this other conference last year called Symbolic World. I don't know if you're aware. Jonathan Peugeot, he was at the conference. He spoke on the AI panel. I went to his conference last year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to a conference that is more directly connected to the corner of the internet that I hang out. People call it this little corner of the internet, like around this guy named Paul Vanderklay, who was also at ARC. And I don't know if you watched any of I went to ARC vlogs that I did. There's a section in like a second day where Paul does what's called Estuary.
Mm-hmm.
And these conferences that we do are centered around that. And so there's this idea, what do you do? And the last session was building. It was about building and all that kind of stuff like you're talking about. And Peterson's last words were, pick up your oar and row, like do something, basically. Mm-hmm. And I have this is my theory, is just like what you exactly like the way that you framed it. You were given a fire hose worth, or like a feast worth of information and perspective and inspiration. But sometimes there's like not a tangible outlet for that. Like you're saying, like, what do I do? So, well, I'm signed up for Peterson Academy. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But in this corner, one of the kind of philosophical ideas that gets passed or that gets talked about is that we're kind of I'm not going to say this right, collective intelligence. Mm-hmm. And so how do you activate a collective intelligence? Because it's like, well, you noticed that you were one of the only young people that you met from the United States at ARC. It's like, well, who do I talk to about this? Yeah. Because I think that's actually very, very important.
Yeah, well, that's exactly, and I thank you for putting that out loud, because yes, that's exactly the problem, is amazing information, but you can't do it by yourself. So where's the community that you can kind of plug into? And like you said, where's that collective, we're going to work together on this to problem solve? I don't know.
Well, there's a conference in August in Chicago that you should come to, actually.
Okay. What's it called?
It's called Midwest Estuary. Okay. And it's, I'm just saying it's another piece of this. Like I went to ARC, I went to Symbolic World. Mm-hmm. This is the thread, in my opinion.
Yes.
This is the meaning thread. This is and the people that are having that conversation are in these places that are having the conversation. ARC is a lot of people that are already highly empowered, already have a lot of agency maybe, and they're grappling with things, on the legislative front or on the business front or on the religious front, all that stuff. But like for the average Joe or Jane, maybe, or young person, it's like, okay, well, I think you could aim at politics. Like, it sounds like you have a little bit of something that's going on in your mind about that arena. You could aim at, it sounds like you have a creative background, writing and the arts, and Symbolic World probably represents the biggest art side of this Peterson phenomenon from my perspective. Like the people that opened up the song, there was a lady with like gold dreadlocks, and I don't know, the very first.
Yes.
So that's Neil deGrade. He's been on the podcast. His wife, Kate, they're part of Symbolic World crew. Jonathan Bijot. There's this whole Martin Shaw. He's he's called a Sharnacki. He's an Irish storyteller. Rod Dreher, he's wrote a book about enchantment. So there's like a whole side of things there. And then this place where I'm at, I'm trying to get around to answering questions like, so what did I do?
Yeah.
I started a podcast, but I had to kind of LARP myself into, I just started talking to people who were in this corner who had channels that were talking to each other, and basically, and it built something kind of real that then you could invite people to. And so whatever you can do to build something real that you can invite people to, and then that actually is itself a story, but then you can also, through that, is an opportunity to tell a better story than the cultural ones were given. And so when I went to the Symbolic World, at the end of it, there was a illustrator named Vesper Stamper. She was the last speaker, and she's like, pick up your pen. It was very similar to the Peugeot thing. Pick up your camera, pick up your instrument, and create. And I mean, you even said this earlier. You already have there. That's a part of you. I mean, that's a deep part of that thing. And sometimes we look at the culture and we think, I have to go be the warrior. And maybe you are a warrior. I don't know. I don't know if I'm a warrior, but I do want to do something that I can. And so this is part of that. This is, so I don't know if that answers your question, but finding more people to figure out how to have that conversation and see what emerges. Yes. What's going to emerge from this? I think that's part of it. So that's my insight. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's helpful. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So that was ARC. So let's talk about Peterson Academy a little bit. What's been your experience? Obviously, you were impacted by Peterson's work. Like, what made you think this is a path that I need to pursue?
So, and this is a crazy story. I was listening to a podcast by Peterson. He mentioned that he was putting together the Peterson Academy, and this was very early on when they had just started recording lectures. I think they had maybe recorded 2, and had been talking about how he's doing this collective project with his daughter, Michaela. And I had never listened to anything that Michaela had done. I knew she had a podcast, had never really explored that. And so followed her on Instagram, kind of started following what she was doing with Peterson Academy. And one day she posted on her Instagram story, we're looking for students, apply for dates below if you're available to fly to Miami and sit in and participate in filming. And I thought, well, that sounds like fun. So I scrolled through the list of dates. They didn't tell us who was lecturing on what dates. We could just choose from, the ones that were given. And then it was kind of by lottery whether or not we got accepted in. And so submitted my application for the 1 week that I had available, vacation time. And about a month later, got an email saying, congratulations, you've been accepted into the Dr. James Orr lectures and the Dr. Jordan Peterson lectures. These were the second ones that he did. Over the moon excited. I'm going to go fly to Miami and sit in the classroom with Jordan Peterson. This is going to be amazing. And what I was not expecting is to meet and interact with 30 of the most incredible young people that I had ever had the opportunity to be around. Like, whatever they have created over at the Peterson Academy, like the audiences that they draw, just incredible. People from all different backgrounds, parents, models, entrepreneurs, people who had immigrated from South America and started their own businesses, all different backgrounds, all different religions, all between the ages of, I would say, 20 and 32. And the 30 of us just had such a great time talking and bouncing ideas off each other. And the lectures were amazing. Getting to meet Dr. Peterson, of course, was absolutely incredible, and Dr. Orr. And to get to kind of hear their ideas and their trains of thought was very cool. But what really got me hooked on it was the community that it drew. And these are the intellectuals, kind of like we were just talking about. This is the circle of thinkers that I want to be a part of. They are trying to make the world a better place through education. And so that kind of is what sparked my initial interest. Obviously, getting to be a part of the filming process was great, but it truly is the crowd that it draws that I was like, I have to be a part of this.
So, two things. One, James Orr just released a conversation. Well, of course, he was a part of the Gospel and the Exodus seminar with Peterson on Daily Wire, but he released a conversation, or Jonathan Peugeot released a conversation that he just had with James Orr. I guess it was it may have been pre-arc. I don't know. It just released yesterday. I listened to it. And it was, the Symbolic World Crew is pretty orthodox, like Orthodox Christian. They're kind of like, most of them are. And so it's kind of like their thing. But James Orr is an Anglican, and they were having a great conversation. And as a Protestant myself, it was kind of like, this is where I get more excited, is when there's kind of, like you said, like this, to Paul Vanderklay, who is kind of the gravity of the corner that I'm in. His whole thing's called estuary. And what is estuary? It's when the waters come up, the fresh and the salt waters mix, and then like stuff happens there and things emerge, life emerges. And he has a conversation protocol called estuary. And one of his biggest critiques for ARC was that there wasn't a layer to allow for the emergence of something like what happens at a lecture like that. You say there's 30 of you guys, like, you listen to it, and then all of a sudden all this back and forth starts taking place. But like it's kind of because maybe there was about 2 groups of 15 or a group of 8 and a group of 20 or something, it's like, and then and so that conference that I was just talking to you about, it's an estuary conference. It's based around this idea that we have to get the ideas and the collective intelligence of us together. Like that was even what you just like reflected back, it wasn't just the grand ideas of these lectures. It's what these people draw together, the community that these people draw together, which is extrapolated out over the idea about ARC as well. But also that whole, take it back to the earlier part of the conversation about what is college. Is it just the information? And we've kind of boiled it down to saying, it's just the information in the paper. And like, how wrong is that?
Exactly.
How completely actually wrong is that? And so now there are times where that might be a good option. My wife in grad school online, we both got the traditional college experience too, like when we were 20. But it's like, so what I hear is like, wow, so you have these centralized figures. And so like John Vervaeke, who I mentioned earlier, speaking at that, Rod Dreher, who I mentioned about enchantment, speaking at it, Jonathan Peugeot is going to be speaking at this conference. And so like there is a sense of that these people will draw a certain type of people, but a layer within the conference and a priority is to get these people within conversation, like
that's so cool.
into a conversation protocol, actually.
Yeah.
That's the estuary protocol. And so
interesting. I'm going to have to look into that. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, just start sub to Paul Vanderklay's YouTube channel, and then I'll link you some stuff after this. But like, I think that is the thing. And I'm even part of why it sounds like Peterson Academy has made social media an attempt to create a social media ecosystem within the Peterson Academy, is to try to figure out how to work with that as well. So have you been taking other classes, or was it just that experience that you have? Yeah. So what have you taken?
So that, if you participated as a live audience member, you get access to the platform for a year free of charge. So I have definitely been taking advantage of that. And they're still working on building out the social side, kind of like you said. They do have, it kind of looks like Facebook, if you have had the chance to look at their website, and a little bit archaic in terms of the back and forth, but I think that they're working on developing better software to get people connected within their regions. So, I'll be able to type in my zip code and see other students within my vicinity. So if we want to facilitate a study group or, discussion, we can do that. So that's going to be cool if and when that ends up being, it sounds like that's what they're trying to go for, but it's still a work in progress. So for now, it's just been mostly for educational purposes. And I've kind of done, Bishop Barron did a really great one on faith and history of the Bible, which has been really cool. And so I went through that. The one I'm taking right now is on narcissism, again, psychology. that's been super cool. Of course, Peterson's lectures on Nietzsche, went back and re-listened to those, and those are great, super interesting. Did one on the greatest leaders in history. That is a fascinating class where the professor basically walks you through the top, I want to say the top eight of the world's most influential leaders, their background, where they came from, why they were successful, and what we can take from that. So very neat. And one of the cool things about Peterson Academy too is the whole idea of it was, let's invite all these professors who are so used to having the constraints of the schools that they teach at, or, you know, maybe not necessarily professors, but that's kind of how it started, and give them the opportunity to present a lecture on anything they want, however they want to present it, whatever they're most passionate about. Let's give them an opportunity to teach. And so you truly do see just a really cool like passion and excitement, and every single professor that presents is highly engaging, and they've got amazing graphics. Yes, it's online university, but it's completely different than the online university that I experienced.
Oh. Yeah, so the media is, I mean, you can only imagine what was thrust upon, you know, the institutions of like, all right, well, now everyone's online to do it and you're at this school, but it's really up to the professor on how excellent this is going to be executed. And what they don't realize, maybe, or maybe they do, but that they've tripped over their own demise in the sense of like, if somebody can just do the whole thing better, it's decentralized and people will flow towards that. And I know Peterson's like maybe in the race for that is what, you know, in a certain way. But so is there a path? I know at some point there was a conversation about a path towards credentialing. Has like, what are you thinking about that? And what do you know about that so far?
So I only know what Michaela talks about on her public platform and kind of what's been shared on the public stance. They don't give us necessarily behind the scenes information. And what I've gathered just from what I've listened to and heard in the different discussions is that they are working towards credentials because their goal is to redefine higher education. So they want to prove that they can provide a Ivy League level course for a fraction of the price. Like basically they're going after the fact that we're getting poor quality education for a ridiculous amount of money, and it's not necessary. Like we can produce something that is so beneficial for, you know, I think it's $500 a year is how much the subscription costs, which is like the equivalent of 2 college classes at a state school. So that's been really cool. And I think that it's definitely going to be a tough battle for them if they do decide to pursue accreditation. I don't think that's going to be an easy process.
No.
But worth it if they're willing to poke that bear, I think.
Yeah, if they crack the code, if they can beat the system, then that is a path towards something. But I think that there is, because Ivy League education isn't just Ivy League education. It's the network that it puts you in contact with, just like we were talking about earlier. How valuable is that network still? How valuable versus the education itself, and like taking the education out of, like putting Ivy League education into basically a hierarchy-less digital reality where, you know, anyone can have access to that, also does interesting things sociologically, I think. And that's some of the stuff that I'm interested in with what the digital is. I call it the digital. It ate music, it ate video, it's eating education right now, it's eating finance, it's like all these traditional institutions. It's eating the walls of the church. It's doing all sorts of things right now. And so, you know, that was one of the reasons I thought this story was interesting with you. I think that it was interesting because you are young and you made a big trip, and you know, by yourself, I think. Yeah, I did the same. I kind of had a little bit of a network because of this podcast. Several of the people that were there I've had on the podcast, so that was helpful.
Yeah.
But like, were you actually alone? Did you know anybody coming in other than getting to meet?
I mean, I knew like the famous people, but not like know them.
You shook Peterson's hand after the lecture, right?
Oh yeah.
So he remembers you, of course. He's only met
Of course.
a million people. Yeah, that's it. That's pretty incredible. And I think it's admirable. And I think that people should, I think that'll speak to certain people. It spoke to me. And so, yeah, I want to encourage you to maybe consider coming out to this conference. It's a little bit zany. It's not some of the people, it's real Gen X. I'll just tell you that.
Yeah.
It's very Gen X. I'm not Gen X, I'm millennial, but so there's a big Gen X vibe to it, but I want younger people there. I want younger people to actually be valued and highlighted because I had the distinguishing experience of being in college when Facebook was created by college students. And like people just kind of forget, like,
yeah,
young people can do shit. So I just really, now Facebook's like old, but like that was like, that kind of cracked the code on social media.
Yeah.
And that happened by, college students. Like,
yes.
And so
Step up from MySpace, right?
Yeah, right. It was MySpace it was a thing. But yeah, so that always sticks in my mind of this meme of like, well, why can't young people change the world? I mean, they do. And so I just want to encourage you on your endeavors related to such things. And yeah, it was great to bump into you. Was there any other thing that you were kind of like, hey, this might be interesting for us? We've got a little bit more time. Like, my kind of line of questioning is kind of, but were there things that you were considering if this would be, I wonder if we might talk about X? Was there anything that we haven't hit on?
Ooh, that's a good question. I feel like we covered so much ground. So I guess my question is there anything that you might like me to clarify or expound on? I feel like we've bounced around kind of a lot of different topics, which is
sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we've kind of danced around the religious question for you. Liberty University. What else you said? You worked for Joni Eareckson on so what's that story?
The religious story?
Yeah.
Or the nonprofit story?
Either one, both.
Either one. Okay. Religious story is a bit of an interesting one as well. I love education, if you can't tell. And so I have kind of had the opportunity to get to experience a wide range of denominations. I grew up in a Baptist church very early on, and my family transitioned over to non-denominational. My parents were involved in children's ministry, and so spent several years in a non-denominational church. And then we decided that we wanted something a little bit more liturgical, a little bit more structured. And so we moved to the Presbyterian church, and we were there for about 3 years. And then the pandemic happened. And in our area, even though Texas remained relatively open, 90% of the churches closed. There were no churches meeting in person. Everything was online. And, that's okay for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. But as we're getting into, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, it got to the point where my family was tired of sitting on a screen and watching church. And so we got online and looked around to see if there was anybody meeting, anybody open. And the only church in our area that was meeting in person was an Anglican church. We had never looked into Anglicanism. That was not even on our radar, and just decided we're going to go and see what happens. And so if anybody's ever been to an Anglican church, it looks very similar to a Catholic mass, at least in the type of Anglican church that this was affiliated with the global. We're not under the Archbishop of Canterbury. We have a different hierarchy at this particular church. And so that sparked a whole, okay, what is liturgy? What is a liturgical service? I had never heard the word Eucharist before in my life. I was 18 years old at the time, and just went down the spiral of researching the historic church. And from there, it's been really cool because so many of these influential leaders and speakers and thinkers involved with Peterson and kind of how you're describing with Symbolic World are affiliated with a liturgical background, whether that's Orthodoxy or Anglicanism or Catholicism. And so to have gotten to really have this political and world-changing interest align with the journey that I was on spiritually and with my faith has been really, really unique. And Anglicanism has been wonderful. I've been an Anglican for the past, I guess, 4 years now, and am now, largely thanks to Tammy Peterson, researching Catholicism more heavily. Anglicanism is so close that I've kind of reached a point where I'm like, why? We're trying to mirror Catholicism so closely, and why won't we just, kind of make that leap? So that's what I am currently looking into and learning about personally. And it's been really, really a cool journey. I'm thankful for it.
Yeah, that is awesome. And that is, I mean, like you said, so two things there. You talked about the liturgy, your journey into more like liturgical practices related to the sacraments, but also who was still meeting, who was talking, and or sorry, I'm hearing an echo, but so it was the Anglican church that was still meeting. So there was also this like attraction to courage related to that. So I think that's an important part of the story as well. And so what was the other thing we talked about? We said the religious, and then what was the other piece that I guess the ministry side. So you were with that, and then with Joni Erickson, and I don't know if I'm saying her name right. The only person that I was interested, if you've met or come across, do you know who Annie Crawford is?
Annie Crawford. I don't think that I do.
I think she's Anglican, but she works with Symbolic World and has writes for them, but she's kind of a classical educational person. She's a kind of a C.S. Lewis scholar person. And she's in this space. She's in Texas. I think she's in Austin or Houston. I can't remember. But she might even be at this conference we're looking at hosting here in August as well. She's mentioned it on Twitter, but I would encourage you to, I'll kind of try to link her to you too, because she's very in this conversation as well. And I think it would be a great person for you to connect with. And I think she even does some horses. So there's
well, if she's in Houston or Austin, that would make sense.
Yeah. So there's that. So you were part of that ministry. I mean, I don't know if there's a story you want to tell or don't want to tell about that, but like, just kind of leading into, what are you kind of were like grasping, well, what can I do with all this? But has there been anything that you kind of have maybe inside been like, maybe this is it? I don't know.
Yes. So definitely, I mean, obviously faith is a huge part of my background and my story. And regardless of the denominations, that's been a consistent. And getting to work my first, big girl job, being at a nonprofit and being in a space of ministry, in a space of faith, that has been just a huge blessing. The people that we get to interact with, both, my coworkers, but also the people that we serve, just have taught me so much about, what it does mean to be the hands and feet of Jesus, right? You serve the disability community. You get more out of being involved with those people than you could ever hope to give to them. They are on a totally different level, not only of faith, but just of understanding and exemplifying the love of God, like just so genuine. And so that has shaped my life pretty significantly. But a large part of the reason that I did decide to leave the organization in favor of trying to get involved with the culture change movement is because disability is not being talked about, at least from what I've seen. It tends to be more lumped in with the identity politics and what do you say?
The cultural left.
Yes, the cultural left, for lack of a better word, has kind of taken on the disability community as ours. And I'm not exactly sure why that is or what caused that. It's just something that I've observed, and I have not seen there be an attitude so much of inclusion surrounding what the what the right is discussing. And not saying that they're not aware of it and that it's not on their agenda. Maybe it is, I don't know. But I wanted to attempt to position myself in such a way that I could advocate for the disability community and basically ensure that it does not get flushed down the toilet with the ideals of the radical left and identity politics, because disability is not an identity. It's something that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people live with every day. It's not even really a minority. In the United States, 1 in 5 households have somebody with a disability, whether that's physically or mentally. So it's a huge aspect of our culture and population. It also happens to be the most unreached population in the world, because they do live in isolation all the time. They don't have the resources to go the places that they need. Maybe they don't have the medical care. Churches are often very unwelcoming to these individuals because, maybe they can't sit through a service, or maybe they do have extreme medical needs. And so how can I help to bridge that gap and bring them in? Because they also have great things to contribute to society, and there's so much that we can learn from them, and they are, part of our future as well, right? So let's make sure that they have a place and a space for that. But it's certainly not something that I can do by myself. And so that's kind of where what you were describing comes into play, trying to figure out how can we as a Gen Zers moving forward combine our collective interests. My passion is disability, maybe yours is politics. How can we work together to make sure that the world is a better place, even though I'm not a politician and you are, but we can still work together and kind of move forward. And I know this is a kind of a very broad concept, and I'm still kind of working through, narrowing it down and clarifying exactly what that means for me moving forward. But ultimately, that's kind of the goal and the idea.
The things that it immediately makes me think of, I keep hearing Peter Thiel say, we are ensouled beings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember that part of the AI conversation. He's kind of an odd character. I think he's even said in some ways that he's a Christian, but I don't know all the finer details of that reality.
Yeah.
But I think that's like when we're in these settings, it's like things that we can like reach and grab for that are like, okay, if you believe that's true, I want you to meet my friend, Jim, and Jim's disabled, so there's like things like that. And then also the left, the cultural left, prides itself in being, what is it? The victim status hierarchy. And so like people of low repute or status or ability are, placed at the higher points, supposedly placed at the higher points of the hierarchy. And so, it makes sense of why they would feel like, well, we got this is our thing. And then also there's big political ideas related to, Medicare and Medicaid and social, So then these priorities, just like you're saying, there's tension with budget cuts, but with, caring for the ensouled. And it's like, which is everybody. And he even invoked the Imago Dei. So it's like, okay, so we need that's a part of the Imago Dei. We have to keep that in the conversation. So I think that is part of the thing, is being able to position yourself in conversations where that avocation can come through and then be a part of the actual conversation. Because it's just like you said, everyone's got either their blinders or their focus or their attention in their own landscape of what's important. And like I liked how you said, so how do we do that collectively? And so, I think that's the future is more conversation. I think, I hope.
Yes. Well, it's not a leftist issue or a right issue. It's a human issue, right? So what can we do as a culture to make sure that these people have a space? And I also say too, and this was just a thought that I had, the ARC talked a lot about like energy and providing reliable energy. And I'm going to make this make sense. Hold on.
Oh, no, I like this. Go ahead.
They wanted to provide reliable energy to people across the world because they want to free up space for innovative thinking, right? And creative expression. And when people are so focused on trying to survive, they don't have the opportunity to get creative and figure out how can we, build a better culture and a better society and focus on families and things like that, because they're worried, okay, how am I going to get water to my house today? So the energy crisis is a human issue, right? The disabled community and families living with this type of stress, it's the exact same issue. They are so focused on just trying to survive from day to day that we don't know what we're missing out on in terms of, these parents and these siblings and even people who have disabilities. They're so focused on trying to survive because maybe they don't have the resources and they don't have the community and they don't have the opportunity to do anything outside of just focusing on living. And so we're missing out on what they have to offer as a human, as a thinker, as a soul, kind of like you said. And so if we're going to be focused on something like the energy crisis, which is great, but practically speaking, there's really nothing that like us normies can do about providing energy to the world. Anybody can get involved in helping the disability community. That's something that anybody and everybody, especially if you're of a religious background, can participate in making a possibility, making a better world for them. And so that, I know that's kind of also a broad concept, but that's something that I kept thinking of every time they were talking about the energy crisis. I'm like, okay, this is great. Not a lot of practical application for me, but if we're talking about pulling people out of survival mode and giving them an opportunity to be creative, that I can do. I can't necessarily provide you electricity, but I have ideas.
Yeah.
So kind of that's
it is one of those things. Where do you start? And I mean, so that's the big idea with energy is actually, I mean, that concept's pretty radical in the face of, the conversations about, climate change and everything that's dominated the last 20 or 30 years of conversations around energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember during the campaign, randomly, Trump got asked a question from like a mom, like a random mom in a group. And that was actually his answer. We got to get cheap energy. and I was like, and then I heard that reiterated through ARC, the previous year and Peterson's conversations along the way. And that is, I would say, what's interesting is how what you just did was actually tie the conversation around energy to disability and flourishing, and just the fact that you are now able to tell that story in a conversation, I think is actually really powerful. And that was given, tell better stories and given through this vehicle of the ARC to be able to do that. I think that's also part of it. And because there's so many competing narratives that are, maybe not as helpful, or maybe not but not as helpful.
Yeah.
And so, well, this has been wonderful, Chloe. And there's so many things I want to connect you with. And, hopefully, as you continue going on, things will make sense for these network effects to affect. And this has been really wonderful. So I really appreciate you. Yeah.
Thank you for your time and for this opportunity. It's been fun.
Good. Well, hold on and we'll finish this thing backstage.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.